ถ้าเราทำเป็นมองไม่เห็นมันจะทำอะไรเราไม่ได้
The movie opens in New York, where we see a woman named Ruja pleading with someone to lend her a substantial amount of money for her daughter Rachel's eye treatment, but the person on the other end refuses. Ruja is feeling very distressed and helpless when Rachel approaches and asks her if she is going to go blind. Ruja goes to her, urging her not to worry, and reassures her that she will not let that happen, and that she will be able to see as before after the surgery. Later, as Ruja reminisces about her deceased husband by looking at his photo, the lights suddenly flicker, and there's a knock at the door. The man at the door introduces himself as Wichai, a friend of her father, and tells her that he has something important to discuss, and suggests that she should return to Thailand. Later, as Ruja sleeps beside Rachel, she is awakened by coughing, and to her horror, instead of Rachel, she sees an old woman. Terrified, Ruja listens as the entity warns her not to go back, and suddenly, she awakens in a car. Frightened, and Wichai informs her that they have arrived. Ruja enters her ancestral home with Rachel, where they are greeted by the maid Da, who welcomes Ruja back. Ruja introduces Rachel to Da, and just then, Wichai asks Ruja to come to the studio with him, as he needs to leave soon. Ruja leaves Rachel in Da's care and accompanies Wichai to the studio. There, Wichai shows her 2 paintings her father Paykorn had made 20 years ago. Ruja becomes a little frightened when she notices some movement in one of the paintings, but Wichai interrupts and explains that painting number 1 was sold to one of his fans for several million, but it was returned to the studio after the owner killed all of his family members, and then himself. Underneath the painting, there was a note left by the owner that read, "I am returning you to your creator." The second painting, her father had previously stated, was not for sale. However, now a millionaire is willing to pay a fortune to purchase both of them. She asks him when they will receive the money, to which he questions if she's not even going to ask how her father died. Wichai tells Ruja that Paykorn hung himself there. He asks her to forgive her dad and to consider these expensive paintings as his redemption, but she says she wants to leave if they are finished. Wichai informs her that the paintings have some cracks, and he wants them to be fixed before they sell them, and his son, who is an art restorer, can take care of it. Ruja tells him to proceed, and adds that after her dad's funeral, she wants to sell this house too. Meanwhile, someone gives Rachel a red scarf, and she is very happy to receive it. However, Da is shocked to see it and asks her where she got it. Rachel says that she just gave it to her, to which Day asks her to return it so she can wash it first. After a while Rachel is alone in her room, she hears a noise. Investigating, she heads toward the source, but suddenly a door closes on its own. Assuming her mom is nearby, she approaches the door where she notices a cloth hanging from it. But before she can reach for it, Ruja comes there, causing the cloth to slip inside. Later that night, we witness Day walking through the woods to an old house, where she ties the red scarf onto the handrail. She then pleads, "Please don't hold it against me," and suddenly, a powerful wind begins to blow, and Dawn notices a hand pressed against the window. Frightened, she attempts to flee but stumbles, only to discover that her leg is entangled with the scarf. Meanwhile, Ruja awakens to a noise and realizes that Rachel is not in bed. She comes out searching for her and discovers her downstairs. However, at that moment, Rachel calls her from inside the room, startling Ruja. Suddenly, a demonic hand grabs Rachel's leg, and as Ruja attempts to reach her, the door slams shut, trapping Ruja's fingers. She tries to pull her hand out and abruptly wakes up from her sleep. She realizes that it was a dream, but becomes anxious upon finding Rachel missing from her bed. Frantically, she begins searching for her, and upon coming out of the house, she notices a bandage on Da's ankle, but disregards it, urging them to split up to search for Rachel. Ruja ventures into the studio and notices a figure shrouded beneath a cloth. Assuming it's Rachel playing a prank, she angrily asks her to come out. However, her anger turns to terror as the figure gets up and swiftly lunges toward her, seizing her within the cloth. Despite her attempts to escape, she finds herself trapped. Suddenly, 2 hands seize her face, and in the blink of an eye, the entity disappears. Meanwhile, Rachel wanders through the forest, unaware of her surroundings. She unknowingly approaches a snake, but suddenly someone pulls her back. After a while, Ruja encounters a man carrying Rachel on his shoulders, and relief floods over her as she sees Rachel safe and sound. The man introduces himself as Tim and explains that he's here to fix the paintings. Ruja tells Rachel never to go alone because it's dangerous, to which Rachel responds that she was accompanied by a woman wearing a red scarf, but Ruja suspects she is lying. Upon arriving home, Ruja inquires of Da about her ankle, to which Day responds that it's just a sprain. Ruja then asks Tim what he was doing in the woods. Tim explains that his dad had mentioned a beautiful stream behind the house, and luckily, he bumped into Rachel. Ruja informs him about Rachel's vision impairment, emphasizing the risks of her wandering alone, and then expresses gratitude. Tim proceeds to the studio to inspect the paintings. However, his attention is diverted when he notices a box on the floor containing several photographs. As he examines them, he suddenly hears a sound behind him. Tim re-examines the painting and discovers that the girl depicted in it now bears cracks in her eyes, which were absent just moments before, and the same crack appears in the second painting as well. He returns to Ruja's home and urges her to come see something in the studio, but she says he doesn't need her permission for whatever it is. However, he emphasizes that it's not related to restoration and insists that she must see it. When they arrive at the studio, he reveals the cracks to her and admits he had no idea it was this severe. Then, he chips off a portion of it, and to their astonishment, they uncover another painting beneath it. Ruja urgently insists he puts it back right away, but he counters, questioning whether she wants to see what lies underneath. He suggests it could be a significant discovery, potentially enhancing the artistic value of her father's paintings. But she remains resolute, stating she doesn't care. When she returns home, a sketch falls in front of her, and as she picks it up to check it, a scene from her childhood suddenly flashes before her eyes. She rushes upstairs and discovers Rachel holding Ruja's childhood dress. Ruja angrily snatches it away, telling Da that she shouldn't allow Rachel to play with dirty clothes. She then brings Rachel back to her room and goes to the washroom to clean her hands. The scene shifts to her childhood, where she is holding a sketch. Suddenly, blood begins dripping onto it, and she discovers a dead snake right above her. Just then, she gets startled to see a dead snake on the wash basin, but it disappears the next moment, and only then, she hears Rachel's scream. She rushes out to check on her and finds that Rachel is scared, and Rachel tells her that there is someone under the bed. Ruja peers under the bed and gets shocked to see someone's legs and the doors and windows of the room slam shut. Ruja is horrified to find a demonic entity on the bed with Rachel, and as Ruja approaches, the entity smiles, revealing that it has removed Rachel's eyes. A snake emerges from the entity and enters Rachel's eye, and suddenly, a red scarf tightens around Ruja's neck. Ruja frees herself and rushes to Rachel, finding her unconscious. Ruja quickly takes her downstairs, pleading with Tim to help get them out of there, but he asks her to calm down, saying it's pouring outside. After a while, Tim presents Rachel with a magical anklet and explains that wearing it and moving around will produce a jingling sound capable of repelling demons. Later, Ruja goes to the studio to check on Tim, and he informs her that he was just about to come and get her. She expresses her reluctance to enter the studio, suggesting they leave as the rain has stopped. However, Tim insists on taking a look first before they depart. Ruja is shocked to see that Tim has ripped off the painting, but he explains that he really wants to know what's underneath it. The man depicted in the painting is the one who committed suicide, and Tim suggests that by peeling off the entire painting, they might uncover the truth behind why the man took his own life. However, Ruja tells him that it's none of her business and insists that Tim get her and her daughter out of there. As they are leaving, suddenly their car stops, and when Tim tries to start it, it doesn't respond. Meanwhile, Rachel notices a figure in the distance under a tree. In the next moment, the figure haunts her, and Tim and Ruja realize that Rachel is gone. They venture into the forest, searching for her, where they hear the jingling of Rachel's anklet. Just then, Ruja spots Rachel and immediately goes after her. And on the other hand, Rachel also sees her mother, and as she is going after her, Day comes there and stops her. Meanwhile, Ruja hears a noise as if someone is choking, and sees a lady hanging from a tree. The scarf from the hanging figure moves towards her, and Ruja notices it wrapped around her ankle. She then gets pulled away and finds herself at the old house. From inside, she hears Rachel's voice. Ruja is on the verge of entering the house when a cloth unexpectedly flies off a painting. Startled, she then hears Rachel's voice emanating from the forest, prompting her to turn back and head into the woods once again. Following this, Da is on the brink of throwing Rachel into a pit, but Ruja arrives and insists that Rachel be released. Da rebuffs her, claiming she has no choice, as failing to comply would mean no peace for her. Ruja argues that Rachel is just a child and shouldn't be involved, prompting Day to suggest that Ruja jump into the pit instead, promising to release Rachel if she does so. In a subsequent flashback, we witness the night when the entity commanded Day to kill Ruja and her family, revealing the motive behind Da's actions. At that moment, Tim strikes Da, causing her to fall into the pit and die, while he successfully rescues Rachel. Upon their return to the studio, Ruja attempts to destroy the paintings, but suddenly, the lights in the studio flicker off, and when the electricity returns after a while, Rachel asks Ruja if she believes she can save her by destroying the paintings. Ruja is stunned to hear this, and to their horror, they witness Rachel turning towards them with a chair. Possessed, Rachel declares that she is not her daughter, and blames Ruja and her family for her current state. Suddenly, they hear cracking sounds emanating from the paintings, and they watch in terror as the paintings begin to crack. Rachel then screams and launches herself at Ruja, attempting to kill her. Tim rushes to intervene, but Rachel throws him aside, and in a split second, Ruja seizes the opportunity to strike Rachel and free herself. As they rise to their feet, they are shocked to discover the original paintings beneath the surface of the altered ones. Just then, the lights in the studio start flickering once more, and after a brief interval, the figure of the lady in the painting disappears, only to reappear in a demonic form before the studio plunges into darkness. The laughter of the lady echoes throughout the studio, sending shivers down their spines, and suddenly, they see her bound and suspended by ropes, before she vanishes once more into the darkness. Moments later, the entity appears directly behind Tim, and just then, Witch-Eye arrives and asks Ruja what happened, but she pleads with him to help her and her daughter escape from the premises, and suddenly, Tim strikes them, rendering them unconscious. In a flashback, we witness Pakorn with a woman, who expresses her determination to do anything to regain Pokarn's love. However, Pokarn gets up abruptly and strangles her with her own scarf. In the present scene, Ruja is bound tightly with ropes and questions Tim's identity. Tim approaches Witch-Eye and presses him for information about the paintings. Witch-Eye explains that after the party that night, Pakorn selected only 2 close friends to remain for what he called the real highlight. Prang, his favorite model, was part of a surprise he had prepared. Pakorn intended for the 2 guests to participate in his artistic creation. It is then revealed that the man is an imposter, and he was the one who had murdered the painting's first owner, along with his family. He then shows Witch-Eye the lifeless body of the real Tim, whom he had also killed. Approaching Witch-Eye, he reveals his true identity as Prang's son, and, without hesitation, proceeds to kill Witch-Eye as well. Then, a flashback reveals that Ruja and Prang's son were childhood friends. Ruja once showed her mother a sketch that Prang's son had made of her, but her mother reacted negatively. The scene shifts to Day with a shaman, who recites spells and casts snakes into Prang's home. The following day, when Ruja visits Prang's son, she discovers dead snakes and flees back home in fear. There, her mother warns her that Prang and his son are dangerous because they belong to a ghost-worshipping hill tribe intent on harming their family. At that moment, Prang's son arrives, looking for Ruja, but her mother advises her that by pretending not to see them, they cannot be harmed. Following this, we see Pakorn has bound Prang with ropes and suspended her, causing suffocation. Yet he continues to paint her. Ruja and Prang's son witness this horrific scene, and driven by desperation, Prang's son rushes in to save his mother, and it is revealed that Pakorn is his father. He pleads with Pakorn to save Prang, but Pakorn remains focused on his painting. Prang's son says he is still unable to understand why his father didn't help his mother that fateful night, but he knew there was someone who could. We then see Ruja, who had closed her eyes despite witnessing everything unfold, heeding her mother's advice that by doing so, they would not be able to hurt them. Ruja's mother was also present at the scene, and instead of helping Prang, she chose to take Ruja away from there. Following this, we see that Wichai and Da had thrown Prang's dead body and his son, who was still alive, into the same pit. Prang's son says he has been waiting to paint her beautiful face, but she is in pretty bad shape right now. Then, he opens a cupboard where he has concealed Rachel. As Ruja pleads with him not to harm Rachel and to hurt her instead, Prang's son counters, stating that Ruja has never experienced the agony of witnessing a loved one being tortured and killed, and that you can't do anything about it. Ruja apologizes to him, but he becomes furious and advances towards her, warning her that she will soon regret her actions. He then proceeds to get something from his bag, but suddenly he is bitten by a snake. It is revealed that Day had secretly put the snake in his bag, fearing that Wichai's son planned to destroy the truth hidden under Prang's painting. Prang's son tries to kill the snake, and in the chaos, Ruja seizes the opportunity to grab a cutter and free herself from the ropes. Prang's son then turns his attention towards Ruja, attempting to attack her, but she defends herself by stabbing him with the cutter. Meanwhile, as the snake moves towards Rachel, Ruja bravely takes action and kills it before it can harm her. As Prang's son advances toward Rachel with lethal intent, Ruja intervenes, swiftly throwing paintings at him, causing him to stumble and fall. Seizing the opportunity, she smashes an alcohol bottle over his head, and with determination, she sets the paintings on fire, engulfing Prang's son in flames until he burns to death. Ruja then emerges from the studio with Rachel, and they swiftly depart from the scene. But we see that after some time, the fire is extinguished, and as her eyes move, the scene cuts here. 1 month earlier, we see Pakorn in the studio, visibly intoxicated, and it is revealed that he too was killed by Prang's ghost, and the movie ends here. Thanks for facing the frights with us. If you survived this video, drop a like, summon that subscribe button, and brace yourself for more horror. Until next time, stay spooked.